Hi, this is Bruce Rawles. I'm speaking with fellow course student and teacher Jackie Lora Jones today, and I'm happy to be doing that again. And as always, we talk about A Course in Miracles. And today, Jackie had some great suggestions. One of them was talking about the projection of error and how we can utilize that to our benefit and to everyone's benefit by looking at the contents of our mind and seeing how we're doing that. Particularly in light of world events, which I imagine most anyone watching and listening to this would be pretty well saturated with all that kind of good stuff, as well
Right.
as, I'm just going to read the quote real quick that you suggested, and it's from What is a Miracle? A miracle is a correction. It does not create nor really change at all. It merely looks on devastation and reminds the mind that what it sees is false. And then lessons 79 and 80, which is let me recognize the problem so it can be solved, and let me recognize my problems have been solved. So there's plenty to cover there. Anyway, thank you, Jackie. Welcome. And it's always a joy to talk with you. So do you want to start with any comments on what prompted those selections?
Oh, sure. At first, I just wanted to say how much I'm so glad to be back doing yet another podcast with you. We were talking a little bit off air that we hadn't done it in a while. And I thought, we're not going to wait this long next time before we get together, because I love doing it. We've done so many, and it's so great to be back with you. So
Likewise,
I
likewise.
guess what inspired this is I often don't even know, other than the fact of when we decided to do a podcast, I always say in my mind, okay, what would be most helpful to people at this time? And I just let it go. And then I'll just be doing something, literally, Bruce, and then it'll just come into my mind. And I'll quickly, if I'm at the phone, I put it in a reminder or the notes, or if I can just come and write it down. And I thought, you know what? With everything going on in the world right now, I thought it would just be really helpful to go over what projection is and all the current events. Let us recognize there's really one problem, and then let us recognize that it's already been solved. This is the metaphysics of it. But what we do is we take our daily experiences, watching the news and watching everything that's going on in our own lives, and others are a part of that. And remembering that, you know what, we can withdraw our projections through forgiveness, take accountability for us, not as the body, but as the one mind that's so afraid of the sin, guilt, and fear in our mind that we've separated, that we have to project a world. When we go back and look at ourselves, not with guilt and judgment, but saying, I was in fear. I was in fear again. Instead of looking within, I projected outward so that I could see all the blame and everything else and all the images, so that I don't have to go back to the mind and let the Holy Spirit heal on both levels, right? And just remember that Course in Miracles is so powerful because it's a course in cause, the cause of everything, which the world is the effect. The world is a projection of the mind. It's never left its source. And so these ideas are flowing through my mind. And that's how I just kind of emailed you. And what do you think about this?
Great,
So,
great. Yeah, great topics, and so timely too, because when we kind of get caught up in the news of the world, whether it's global or national or right under our own roofs, or down the street, or it doesn't, the geography and the scale really doesn't really matter ultimately. It's really all a matter of just noticing, when we're upset, and then getting back to the cause, which is the setup of the upset.
I love that when you say that, right? The setup of the upset.
Yeah,
So,
and that setup is going on 24/7 in terms of the choice of teacher, isn't it? And we know that from studying the Course in Miracles, that there's really only two teachers in our mind at any, and there's only one in any given moment, but there's only two that we have to choose from. One, the Course calls the ego, or the insane thought system of the belief in separation, and the Holy Spirit. I like to call it the inner kindness teacher.
which I love. I
and,
use that all the time. I
oh,
say, oh,
good.
my good friend Bruce Rawles says
Well,
the inner kindness teacher.
it's really the only friend that we really have that's reflected in all of us when we're choosing our right mind, isn't it? Yeah,
Absolutely.
that's
The best friend.
the real friendship that we all have. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. This just occurred to me when you said that, the real friendship. I've just finished some sessions earlier, and some people feeling very alone, as we all do. And it just occurred to me when you said the best friend, and I was sharing with them, these clients, we can feel really alone for sure. But guess who feels alone? The ego, when we're in the ego thought system.
Mhm.
When we choose the miracle, which we are going to talk about here too, that miracle, that correction in the perception of our belief that we're separate from love, that we're separate from our source. In that mind, we're never alone. We feel good when we've ignited that connection again, that
Mhm.
divine spark, as some people call it, or
Yeah.
whatever. It's we ignite that, and we just remember we're not alone. And then our lives, Bruce, because we have a different purpose. Jesus in the Course is always about repurposing from the ego's purpose, which is depression and devastation and death and sin and guilt, and we're bad people and all this. The Holy Spirit is repurposing what we made,
Mhm.
and we're not judging ourselves. Instead, we're changing our mind about the world and recognizing, well, people always want to save the world and heal the world. It's not saved by individual people. It's saved when the one mind, us, takes responsibility for the projection and says, we've never separated. I'm not holding my brothers and sisters prisoner here. I'm seeing images that my mind made. And oh my gosh, lesson, I think it's 131 or 134, I can loose the world from all I thought it was.
Mhm.
The ego believed that it was real. And when we make that shift, and it'll come to you guys, it'll come, in the way the message comes for you, when you recognize, I'm not alone. There's no separate, I'm completely loved. And I think that is so helpful to remember, because, we're in all these challenging times
Mhm.
all the time. We're never asked to deny that, but we are asked when we're ready to look at where all that is coming from.
Mhm. Yeah.
What is the source of the devastation that we see, right? Our own dreaming mind.
Yeah. As your brother-in-law quotes in one of his books, "Behold the great projection," right?
Yes, yes, that's right.
Yeah, and
Gary.
projection is such a really helpful word, because I think all of us understand the idea of movie theater and a projector and a screen, and
Mhm.
the film runs through the projector, and it's the movie really isn't on the screen, it's in the projector,
Yes,
and we
right.
forget that,
Yeah.
because it's so easy to get caught up, and we're passing the popcorn back and forth, and wow,
Yes.
or metaphorically, and we get so engrossed in it, we uh, you know
You forget, you get
we
lost in
forget
it.
this is
Mhm.
just a
Mhm.
really convincing production, and uh,
Absolutely.
and so that, I think it helps to reel those projections back in and say, oh, I'm
Yes.
not upset for the reason I thought it was because of what's happening in a world that I made up, which even modern physics, modern science is telling us is a misinterpretation, and we take it as gospel, and instead
Mhm.
of questioning the fact that maybe we're interpreting things. and
Mhm.
and one of the phrases that crossed my path in the last day or two listening to the news was witness tampering, and I was
Mm.
thinking, well, that's kind of in light of certain legal proceedings that are transpiring while
And
we're making this.
endless.
It's endless, yeah.
Oh,
um, just noticing, like, a little light bulb moment. Well, who is doing the witness tampering in my mind? Well, the only one that can tamper with the evidence and really falsify the evidence is, as you pointed out a moment ago, and it's really the only enemy if there was such a thing that
Right.
we need to look at, is our egos.
That's
So
right.
the ego will take everything that's really neutral, which is all the things in our mind that we've projected out onto a neutral world, and make them good or bad, make them upsetting or pleasing, things to be elated about, or depressed about, or the whole gamut of stuff. Instead of just calmly looking at the contents of a dream and saying, "Wow, this whole thing is a fabrication." Now, it doesn't seem like that happens right off the bat, but
Right.
it takes a lot of practice to
It's a process,
to
isn't it?
look at the
Mhm.
contents of our mind and ask ourselves, is this what I really want? And it seems like a lot of it has to do with, at least been my experiences. The more that I can, when I see something that I'm wanting to condemn or to make a big deal about, if I can say, would I accuse myself of this? That to me is a very helpful phrase. And so if
Yes,
I'm coming from an accusatory place in my mind, I'm using ego to do, witness tampering, basically, of the evidence that's coming in
that's right.
24/7.
Tampering. I love that. Exactly. Exactly. And you mentioned a movie theater, right? Like we're sitting there watching the popcorn and everything. Well, I had the experience of that recently because Mark and I went to see Top Gun Maverick, and I was eating popcorn. I said, "Oh, I indulge when I go to the movie theaters, and I'll get a thing of popcorn, and eating it." And it's so funny how I got so engrossed in the story, right? So much that I had tears a couple of times. And during the movie, Bruce, I kind of snapped out of it and I was looking around at the back of everyone's heads. And I thought, my God, this is so funny. This is just like the dream. I'm in total awareness right now, and everyone's totally focused on the screen. And it was just symbolic
Mhm.
of how we can kind of be outside. People always ask me, what does it feel like? You always say I'm feeling the dream. I'm feeling the dream. What do you mean, by that? And
Mhm.
you can't really explain it because it's an experience. But it's kind of like you're just outside of it. And being in a movie theater is easy because you're looking at the heads and then they're like this, but you're outside going, no, I know you're watching a movie and I'm not focused on the movie right now. I'm behind it looking at it. And it's that doesn't do it justice, but it's kind of like that. You're watching kind of everyone in your life, including your own body. I was watching myself have a mini meltdown the other day, and I literally was watching it. Sometimes the behavior doesn't stop, but when you're watching it without judgment, that is the choice for the Holy Spirit. When you're not judging yourself and you're in the ego mind or in an ego moment, but just not judging, then that becomes, then you're in the right mind. And so I'm looking at myself, my own behavior. I'm looking at everyone, in the theater, and I was thinking, this is so interesting as, an example, a symbolic reflection of really being outside of it in a sense, and then I went back into the movie. I went back into,
Mhm.
it takes so much longer to say it than the milliseconds that I had this awareness that I was, looking at it. It takes longer to explain it. But then
Mhm.
I went back, into it and just was watching, and I just smiled and I thought, gosh, it's so fun to have awareness. Doesn't mean you don't enjoy the movie sometimes. I was totally enjoying the movie on the screen. I enjoy my life quite a lot. My salvation isn't believing I'm a body and everything is like great or not great. I enjoy the times when enjoyment is in the script. I'm sometimes sad when there's sadness, but the sadness no longer engulfs me as my salvation is in getting out of the sadness and doing. You're just, oh wow, these are transitory states of the body. And look at Jackie has tears during the movie. Sometimes she has tears in life, but is there any judgment? No, it's just watching. It's just
Mhm.
watching. And then you're no longer sad when the tears are coming and you're watching without judgment. You're in another part of your mind, right? It's very
Exactly.
interesting.
It really is. Really, I'm glad you elaborated on the theater metaphor. What it reminded me of is, I'm not sure if you remember an ad that when the Apple computer first came out with the Macintosh, they had a 1984 ad.
Okay.
And you could Google it and find it.
Yeah.
I'll put it in if I can find it in the write up
I probably
for
would
this.
remember it if you say
Yeah.
it.
Anyway,
Yeah.
which shows this theater with hordes of people in this darkened room, mesmerized on this giant screen with this Orwellian figure, you know,
Yes.
uh, reciting this mantra of mesmerizing whatever. I forget exactly what it was, but
No, it's
anyway,
ringing a bell. Yeah,
there's
ringing a
this
bell.
lone figure that comes running down the aisle with swirling a hammer, and the hammer is released, and it smashes the screen, and they're all just kind of like dumbfounded, like, well, now what? I don't know if you remember that, but
It's vaguely, it's
it was
vaguely.
quite, it made quite a splash, and it was sort of like a
Sure.
revolutionary ad kind of thing. But the idea is that ultimately we'll have to recognize that we're just watching a screen, and but it's so mesmerizing that, like you say, just a nanosecond or a millisecond that we have this aha lucid moment, and then we kind of go back to everyday
Yeah.
zombie like
Right, right.
adherence to the
Yeah.
the ego's slavish commands of, oh yeah, you gotta deal with this, you gotta. But there was really always that choice in the mind that says, I could see peace instead of this, and I'm not upset for
Yeah.
the reason I think.
Right,
And
right.
I'm picturing Ken Wapnick's wonderful metaphysical chart, and how
Oh,
the whole idea of the ego's strategy, it's a double strategy, and it's sometimes referred to as a double shield of oblivion, is to basically keep us mindless by being endlessly preoccupied by countless permutations of bodily concerns and worldly concerns of every shape, size, and description. Our news is just a perfect example of that.
mm, mm,
And so, there's never a dull moment when we're not firefighting and staying mindlessly preoccupied with taking care of things on the level of form.
right.
However, we can actually, as you were pointing out a moment ago, actually do that in a lucid way and notice how we're feeling.
Mhm,
And
mhm,
if we're not feeling at peace, it's like, oh, maybe I'm seeing this with the wrong vision, with
mhm.
the eyes of through the eyes of guilt rather than innocence and forgiveness. And when we do that, then we're essentially lifted up with Holy Spirit's help into the realm of the mind, where we see our projections, and we're back in the projection room, in the theater of our mind, and see, I'm putting all this unconscious guilt, and that's really the cause of whether it's a congressional hearing, or the latest virus permutation, or the latest news on the war in Ukraine, or the latest whatever, Supreme Court ruling, and yeah, just to name a few of of
Just only those. Yeah, yeah.
a few scenarios that may
Yeah.
have occupied people's minds of late. We're recording this, by the way, on June 29th, 2022, just in case somebody
Okay.
watches this years from now and say, what was all that about?
What are they talking
What are
about?
they
Yeah,
talking
yeah,
about?
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, because now then those will be seem like dwarfed by comparison, right? I'm sure. Yeah.
Yeah, but you guess what they're going to recognize when they watch this years from now? It's always kind of just more of the
Oh
same,
yeah, exactly.
as long as there's guilt in the mind. I
Yeah.
love it that you brought those things up. Can I read something
Oh,
that
please do. Please do.
pertains from lesson 79?
Yes, yes.
Let me recognize the problem so it can be solved.
Mm-hmm.
What you're talking about, you're like, oh, just to name a few, right?
Mm-hmm.
No one could solve all the problems the world appears to hold. So
Mm-hmm.
I always want to remind people that that's not a mistake, that it says appears to hold.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay. No one could solve all the problems the world appears to hold. They seem to be on so many levels, in such varying forms, and with such varied content, that they confront you with an impossible situation. Dismay and depression are inevitable, as you regard them.
Mhm.
Some spring up unexpectedly, just as you think you have resolved the previous ones. Others remain unsolved under a cloud of denial and rise to haunt you from time to time, only to be hidden again, but still unsolved.
That's great. That's great. Yeah. And it
That's
really,
what you were saying.
it really
Yeah,
describes the ego to a T. It's like it's a constant propaganda machine, keeping us
Mhm.
mindless and maintaining the identity of victimhood, persecution, and being at the mercy of the world, instead of
Exactly.
being a decision-making mind that can choose to not misinterpret neutral data and turn it into polarizing and polarized and divisive thinking. Yeah.
Exactly. Well, everything's about division.
Yeah.
So we have division, right? We have Roe versus Wade. We have the the people on one side or the other. We have the political parties. You're on one side or the other, right? Everything is always separation, polarizing, right? But we another question, I always say this because I am a therapist by trade, but another question I always get, just from clients and people, they don't have to be people who know about A Course in Miracles. It can be anyone, they're always like, well, it just seems like, there has to be something else going on here. How can all this chaos year after year, decade after decade, and so for the course students, we go into, well, everything that we're seeing, we have to remember, we're seeing an outside picture of an inward condition. What's the inward condition? Separation, guilt, death, destruction, murder, fear. It's the opposite of what heaven is. Oneness, non-dual. There's no body, there's no form of any kind. With the ego, there has to be, with separation, there has to be form. And then there has to be space with the form to move about in. So we believe that it's more real, right?
Mhm.
And the non-course clients, sometimes I will say, well, what about that feels weird to you? And they say, well, something just doesn't seem right if we're good beings and day after day, year after year, the problems never get solved,
Mhm.
And then I sometimes go into how we're looking at it, that we can look at it differently, right? People understand the fearful part of the mind versus when you feel good and you're like thinking loving thoughts and things like that. Everyone can kind of understand that. And this goes back to projection too. If we're just have the willingness to say, I'm just willing to see this differently. I do want to hold on to these grievances. Look at this war going, or look at this. But if we have the courage and just say, but those images, that I'm an image maker, those images are coming from inside my mind. Maybe I don't go back to the metaphysics right now because I'm upset, but at least I know there's another way to look at this. At least I know that. That is a step. That's an invitation for your higher mind, right? To take your willingness, the miracle, to let go of the grievance, to shift your perception. That miracle can take the form. Your mind will give it form, whatever way is most helpful to you, in a thought, an idea of how you can contribute. The difference is when we all change our mind, we're not accompanying these thoughts with the guilt, with the fear, with the depression, with the anxiety. That's what's different. You're still going to see the screen, but your perception is interpretation. You're going to interpret rather differently
Right.
what the
Right.
body's eyes are showing you, because the body's eyes were made to see form and judge that form, right?
Exactly. For a moment, I thought you were going to say interpreting.
I might have said it. That's right.
No, because that's probably what I would have said. But
Interpreting. I'm creating a word.
yeah, yeah. But the interpretation is such a helpful word in the course, isn't it? Because
Yeah,
it really kind of helps us look at that whole cognitive process in the mind that
yeah,
sees all this neutral stuff and then gives it meaning, like those early workbook lessons suggest that, we've given
Yeah.
everything all the meaning that it has for us.
Oh, they're so good, those early
And
workbook
it's like,
lessons. Yeah.
wow, if I can remember that consistently, then I don't have to get upset about everything. And I think that ties into those two workbook lessons that you chose. The 79, let me recognize the problem so it can be solved, and let me recognize that it has been solved. And for the first part, we have to be willing to see the problem as choosing a thought system that's intrinsically based on duality. And before the recording, we talked about a podcast I listened to recently that a scientist who basically is coming from the perspective of, well, we've tried everything we can think of to figure out how consciousness evolves, is generated from matter, and it just doesn't seem to be happening. So it says, what if we go the other direction? I'm paraphrasing greatly, but I'm taking
Right,
some
right.
liberties. But
Of
basically saying,
course.
well, what if mind is primary? Then things kind of fall out of that and fit the data.
Catching up with that, are they?
Yeah. But it's interesting that the idea that, well, what if the world is a projection, really is a topic of current contemporary scientific inquiry. That what if we're actually seeing a holographic movie of our own making? It's just one of incredible sophistication beyond anything we can imagine.
Yes.
But then from that perspective, then it makes sense to ask that inner kindness teacher, whatever we find is a helpful metaphor, to pass the popcorn in the theater of our mind and say, hey, let's look at this together and see if maybe we can't see a way to not derisively laugh, but gently giggle at the silliness of what we made up and the drama that we wanted to be in this world, and because we wanted to take it seriously.
Yeah.
And instead of saying, well, what if this is a comedy instead of a tragedy? What if it's something that when I'm done being a theater goer, I can walk out of the theater and return to what I really am?
hmm
Yeah.
Beautifully said. I know, because we're addicted to the drama,
Mhm.
and we don't know why until we go to our inner kindness teacher, until we ask any symbol, Jesus, the Holy Spirit, our higher mind, any symbol that will help us, that is giving us the correct perception, vision
Mhm.
of what's really happening, is that this is all coming from you, and that ego's myth to convince us that we've actually attacked God, killed him off, and that now he's coming to get us in the ego's myth. And we're so afraid that we did this, that we flee the mind, the body right along with it, and we make a world so that we can say, oh no, I'm innocent. I'm not a murderer. I didn't kill off God. I'm innocent. All these people are guilty on my screen. Look at them. Look what they're doing, right? That
Mhm.
doesn't have to be a physical murder. Miracles or murder. Murder is just an attack thought, which means it's the opposite of what you really are. Perfect love. There's no form. There's only, but we're having this belief, this dream of separation. And along with separation comes that guilt, because the ego tells us in its myth, it's one or the other, it's you or God. So if you want your individuality as a body, you've killed God off, right? So if we
It's the
don't
dichotomy, isn't it? Yeah.
that's right, understand that
one
premise, it's very hard to
one choice or
understand.
the other, right?
That's
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. You got to pick
One
one
or
at
the
any
other.
given moment, huh? Yeah.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
as Ken usually says, we don't leave the metaphysics too far behind, because then,
Mhm.
people walk around and go, well, I don't feel guilty. I'm not guilty. What are they talking about guilt? And well, yes, well, it's unconscious, a lot of it,
Mhm.
right? And the guilt and the fear. So we don't always walk around, saying, oh, I'm so guilty and I'm projecting it. I don't, but it's unconscious, it's buried. And this is the beauty of A Course in Miracles that I've experienced, is that as you're willing to look at things differently,
Mhm.
your inner kindness teacher, Holy Spirit, Jesus, Buddha, whoever is helping you as a symbol in the dream, that your curriculum works for you, and you will get ideas and thoughts that help you undo this idea that we're separate, that help you say, oh my gosh, you know what, we're not, we're one. We are one in unity with in heaven. Our curriculum is our classroom. And when we bring our individual, lessons, the things that upset us and hurt us, it's amazing when we give those over, put those on the altar of the mind. It's amazing what can come through that can help you in your own way start awakening to the truth. Start feeling better regardless of what's going on. Start recognizing, gosh, my purpose here is really to be helpful and forgive as I'm waking up. And when I choose that part of my mind, I choose it for the whole sonship because I'm one with it. I'm not separate. Regardless of what I see on the screen, I haven't joined with the ego in others. I've joined with the right mind, right?
Yep.
Powerful.
Exactly. And that joining really seems to typically take the place, at least in my experience, is if I can just look at anything that I, as a knee-jerk reaction, want to judge or condemn or criticize or pigeonhole or in any way limit, and just say, what if I'm misperceiving this? What if I'm keeping in my mind at a distance siblings of every sort, and that means that I'm rejecting the kinship that is the intrinsic nature of every relationship, that we're all part of the same fabric, the same, threads in the same, one thread in this giant tapestry that seems to be, individual threads, but we're all the same thing. And the feeling of peace that comes about, even in just a momentary recognition of the idea that, well, what if not only are we not separate, but we're actually the same essence, the same being, the same thing. Which again kind of ties in my, clicks for me as like this, where modern physics I think is going, is it's saying, you can't really separate any one thing out from the universe in terms of, the pure math that describes modern physics. It basically is saying, even Einstein said, that reality is an illusion, albeit a persistent one.
Yeah, it's a great quote.
The reality of the physical universe of space and time.
Right,
But space and time are ways that we make a problem where one isn't in truth. And because it's so convincing, we don't even question it. We're like those theater goers that are so glued to the screen that it, never even occurs to them that they're in a theater. But in those lucid moments, we have these little aha, oh,
yeah,
this is a screen. This is a movie. I could look around and see something else.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's incredible. That's incredible. I find it so helpful to share with people and just use your own life circumstances. That's what we're asked to do. Is that anytime we're upset, well, why is it when we're just upset? If it's all an illusion, then the good times are an illusion. Well, that's true. But the reason why the Course is directing us to when you're upset and not feeling good is because that's when you want a change. That's when you want things to be different, right? You're resisting how it is. And that's always an opportunity to say, gosh, there must be a better way than this, or, how can I feel better? And as we're guided, we look within, and then we choose either atonement or guilt. We choose guilt, which is the ego, or we choose the atonement, which in the Course, that's the correction of your perception that you've sinned. It's the correction saying, you haven't sinned. You built this whole world, this entire space-time dream to prove that you're separate from God, right? and we're not. And eventually we come to the awareness that we want that. We want the truth. It's scary at first. And the Course doesn't want us to give anything up. It never asks us to give things up. It just says, why don't we just look at this a little differently? Just look at your upsets with me without judgment. Look at your upsets with Jesus and just wondering, you know what, I would kind of like to feel better. Maybe it just starts with that. Maybe it starts with, you know, I would love to feel better about this, or I'd love to see this a different way. Or very popular is a lot of my clients, again, they don't know, they're not nothing, don't know anything about the Course, but they'll say there has to be a good part in my spouse, my whatever, there has to be a good part in there. And I say, yeah, and there is. And the fact that you're thinking that, you're out of the judgment for a moment. You're in that part of your mind where you're looking for, there is something good there. And one of my clients 3 days ago was recognizing, you know what? Everyone's in pain. Right, Jackie? I go, that's right. People are in pain. They may not like walk around consciously and be in pain. Often that's how it is. We're in physical, psychological, emotional pain. But even if you're not, deep down is the pain of separation. That can come out and blow out sideways.
Yep.
As anybody knows who's ever had a fit or a meltdown or something like that, or your life could be going on just fine, and then just something upsets you.
The Monty Python foot descends from the sky and
yeah. The funny image, isn't it? Oh my God.
Yeah, and we get blindsided sometimes when we think that the world is supposed to do stuff for us, and instead of yeah, I think you mentioned, you know, early in the conversation, you know, the feeling of being loved, and I think it's again, we have, as egos, we have everything backwards, and we've forgotten that something that we always have an opportunity to do is to be loving, even if the world doesn't seem to love the self that we think we made. but that's, I think, the process of accepting
Beautiful.
without condemnation. It's not the special love of the ego that says, well, this particular person or set of people or you know, country or political party, or you know, all the different distinctions and variations that we can come up with that divide people into groups, or species for that matter, or all kinds of things. That's not it. It's about recognizing that if we can look at what we made up without condemnation and see that we, you know, at usually a pretty slow rate, but eventually come to the realization that we made this up to hide out from the peace that we really want, then from that perspective, we can begin to change it. We can see, well, what if I saw everything as an opportunity to see the loving kindness that's possible in that moment by not condemning, and then it really, I think, dissolves the boundaries in our minds, and the real kinship that's there and has been there all along is available for us to experience.
Beautifully said. The dissolves the boundaries in our minds. Yeah, we have all these constraints, and we look at everything. You see it in the world. People are like they're so rigid in even thinking. That's a reflection here, and just the rigidity of the mind and the belief that we're right. Jesus is wrong, and we're right, and darn it, you know, these people have done this to me, you know. And bodies do terrible things to bodies. We're never asked to deny that. We're merely asked to look at, now, where is that coming from, though? That's true. But it's not going to get us very far when we stay stuck in the limited thinking, not realizing that our mind and the magnitude of who we are cannot even be contained in the universe. So if we really want to walk it back, you know, we can, but we start where we are and say, you know what, I can feel better. What if I wake up and I just want to be of service to people. I just want to feel good. Sometimes you can start with I'll see if I can just spread love today. You were mentioning such a great point. Just be loving, right? Sometimes it's hard when we're not feeling loving, so we're not feeling loved, but just that small idea of, well, you know what if I were just to extend love today to someone? That could take a myriad of forms. That's okay. That's how we start here in the dream. You're carrying groceries or something. Once someone forgot their debit card, I just paid, for their groceries. It's not to be a hero. That's just the form helpfulness took. I didn't mention anything actually until this podcast. I mean, it's not about getting things. It's about if you're just in the mode of seeing everyone as the same and helping all your brothers and sisters who are also in fear, who are deep fear because of their belief in separation. They feel that they're not connected, right? And we don't know what form helpfulness will take in the dream. It can take, many forms, and that's okay. And then it makes you feel good. And that's okay too. The person turns around and says, oh, you have no idea, I'm feeding 3 kids tonight or whatever. You just say, wow, I know how that can be when you're at your wit's end and whatever. That is a reflection of your inner kindness teacher in form of just joining. It doesn't have to be a big grand thing. It just can be being kind. That's where it starts, right?
Yeah, exactly. And kindness is so crucial. And recognizing when we're unkind is really a way to reveal the kindness that's possible in every moment.
Yeah.
And just seeing, well, wait a minute, what if I chose against the unkindness? A moment ago, I think we touched on air and forgiving that, and that was one of the ideas that well, several decades ago, I guess now, when I first started reading the course, and I flipped through the pages, and the distinction between sin and error was such an important distinction of and how we can undo the error, but a sin is unrecoverable. That's a sin is basically something that you can't fix, but an error is just like, oh, I ignored the GPS instruction and took the wrong exit, and my GPS now, if I just listen to it again, it'll tell me how to get back on course, and I can fix that error. It's not a big deal. But the sin thought system says, no, you're stuck here now.
You're a bad person. You're stuck. You're
live out the rest of your life in this cul-de-sac of guilt for this crime that you committed against perfect oneness. The other comment, I know we're kind of jumping all over the map, probably because we haven't talked in a while, or at least I have a backlog of things that I think are fun to talk about. And I know it seems like you always have such great comments as well. The other thing that what you said a moment ago kind of reminded me of is that that we're beyond space and time, and I was flashing on this podcast the scientist had who basically said which I think is kind of inspiring actually, that someone who is steeped in the scientific tradition and the scientific process and method can say, well, one of the things that didn't work is coming from the notion that space and time are fundamental. What if we come from the premise that mind is fundamental? And that I think if our real identity is outside of space and time, then it's also outside of duality, because the only thing that really makes duality work is space and time. If the seeming difference between bodies and the seeming difference in time between events that we think are important, if that goes away, and it gets us back to the metaphysics of the course, and like you were saying a moment ago, we can't stray too far from the course's metaphysics in order to keep progressing with it, and from our beloved course teacher Ken Wapnick. Yeah, so
that's right. Well said. And we are, literally, outside of time and space. Our real identity in the dream, one would want to say that, is a dreaming mind that's projecting all of the universe of time and space along with all the bodies, right along with it. It's a challenging concept until it's not. As you continue to undo the thought and separation, the Holy Spirit's thoughts are not that. So as your mind becomes more of that unity and wait a minute, I'm loved, I haven't sinned. Excellent points, by the way. Jesus always says we're not sinned. It's a mistake that we believe we've separated, and mistakes call for correction, not punishment. So all you people out there that feel guilty and I'm a bad person, well, yes, maybe the image that you're viewing in the dream, as bodies do, have done something bad, but you can remember that that's not the truth of who you are. And mistakes just call for correction. And sometimes I say to myself, gosh, I'm really punishing myself today, aren't I? I have to remember that I'm innocent. I don't say it in a, oh, I can't punish myself. Make it real. I say, wow, I'm punishing myself. I'm mired in these negative thoughts right now. I'm mired in this wanting really, really hard to explain something to someone. And then I step back and go, no, what needs to explain? Everybody's where they are. It's my projection. I don't need to change or correct anything. Now, mind you, everyone, I'm not talking about you don't, correct someone if they say, oh, your name is Martha Jones. And I say, oh, no, actually, it's Jackie Jones. We're not talking about that kind of correction, right? You have to correct people or else they're going to call you Martha the rest of your life. And then it's weird and whatever. So,
okay, Martha.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, Martha.
Got it.
That's me. Yeah. So I'm talking about this, this correction, the Holy Spirit's correction, that you haven't sinned, your belief in sin, and that you're separate, and that you're so afraid of that and you feel guilty, is what caused the projection of the Holy Spirit. So we're correcting that. And when we really want to get down to it, the world isn't even the problem, because it's not, the belief in it is. The Course in Miracles is addressing our belief that there is a world, because it's addressing our belief that we're somehow a separate self. And those separate selves can be a higher form of yourself, or, this part of yourself. It's still a separation idea, right?
Exactly.
So that's what it's going for.
That that belief is this distinction between the world being the problem and the belief being the problem is such an important one.
Yeah, it's not minor, is it?
No, it's not at all minor. And it reminds me of something in one of Doug Sparks' classes recently. He was kind of equating that with, the ego isn't the problem, it's the belief in the ego. Or another way to put it is, it's wanting to be an ego, wanting to be a separate self. That's the problem, because the separate self in truth doesn't exist any more than mathematically, in terms of physics. There is no electron. There's just there's no protons, there's no neutrons. Those are just ideas that seem to appear when we focus our attention on them using a mind that's capable of extraordinary projection. Which is kind of like taking a little bit of what little I know of modern physics and putting it sort of in quasi-course terms. But
you know a lot. People don't know how much you know.
Well,
modest.
I think what I'm inspired by is the fact that some of these mystics who became mystics, or more precisely probably revealed their mystical nature to themselves by giving themselves the opportunity to look at the nature of material reality and seeing material reality isn't material. it's really,
that's right.
It's really fabricated on the fly dynamically by thought.
Absolutely. Gosh, something just occurred to me. I'm going to be not remembering it exactly right, but I was with a young person that kind of sometimes I mentor a little bit, and one of the movies, oh gosh, I can't remember what it is, but it was like Ghost, but it wasn't Ghost, the movie Ghost with Patrick Swayze and Demi Moore, but it was when someone put their hand through a wall. Try to remember what it was, whatever. And my little dude said, well, I think we could probably do that. It's not really hard, is it? And I looked down and I said, I think you're onto something there.
Mhm.
I think this person in the movie's mind didn't believe that it was hard. He was able to go through. So we do not know what you said, Bruce, the constraints
Mhm.
of our mind.
Mhm.
Like you said, we can manifest. That's why people have so much fun manifesting or doing things, because the mind can do those things, right? But the point is what? To ad nauseum, and then you won't always ever be able to get what you want. Look at the state of the world, or we wouldn't always be able to manifest things. We wouldn't. Well, why is that, right? Well, this is the ego's world of seek and do not find. Eventually, when people have had enough, they want to jump off the merry-go-round and say, what is really going on here? All these years, the same thing over and over again. And we do play in the playground of the world and manifest and do this. And there's nothing wrong with that. The question people ask at the end of the day is, God, is my salvation in that? What if I don't get something? Am I going to be rattled? What if this doesn't happen or that doesn't happen? When you can be free of all that, you're really progressing up the ladder as far as that you're better or worse than anyone else, but you're freeing yourself
Mhm. Mhm.
to be more of who you are. You're freeing all your brothers and sisters along with you, because we have everything in heaven that we could ever want. We just don't realize that here. And so we have to have things to fill the void, and
Right.
things and people to feel good. It's great to start out that way. We're encouraged to be loving towards others and have these things, but eventually the course is also encouraging us that we go beyond all symbols, and we go beyond that, and that's something that just happens naturally as a choice, as the right mind gets strengthened and we return home to our true identity, right? Spirit, perfect oneness.
Exactly. Yeah, symbol is such a great word too, and
Mhm.
I think it's sort of used somewhat interchangeably with idol in the course,
Mm,
because we get so attached, and
yes.
both attachment and aversions to symbols.
Oh, good point. Both.
Depending on if we're in a special love or special hate mode when we're in the ego, right? Because that's really
Right.
the only two settings that
Ah,
that thought system has, really. I
that's
mean,
right.
it's either something that I like, that I'm going to be upset. I'm setting myself up for being disappointed when what I liked, suddenly falls apart, or slowly falls apart, or
Right.
it's something that's already fallen apart, uh, or whatever, but
Yes.
um, there's always a duality going on. There's always
Always.
a we they paradigm happening, and which is nothing more than the belief in separation.
That's right.
And I try to remind myself that, as the course puts it, we haven't sinned, we haven't separated, but we've been much mistaken.
Yes.
And seeing the enormity of the mistake sometimes can be staggering, and just a little off-putting.
Absolutely.
But I think, when you have these kind of science fiction virtual reality film moments, and where I was going with that a moment ago, when you were talking about manifestation and having things in the world go your way, I was thinking,
Mhm.
well, gee, maybe a few thousand years from now we will have mastered interplanetary, even intergalactic, time travel, space travel,
It's coming. It's
and and
here.
and
Yeah.
through bionics and 3D printing and who knows what other technologies will have achieved, quasi physical immortality. And
That's
then the
right.
question becomes, well, okay, then what?
Yeah.
Okay,
Then what?
now, okay, now what? Now what's it all about, Alfie?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
is that all there is? Yeah, my wife was watching the CBS Sunday Morning show the other, and they had Peggy Lee on there featured. Is that all there is? Is that all there
Oh,
is?
Aggie Lee. Oh my goodness.
And
Yes.
it's like, well,
That's
what
something.
that's actually a good rhetorical question if we asked Holy Spirit for the answer, and
Right.
the ego's
Right.
answer is no, that's it. Sorry,
Right.
go ahead and get depressed, feel miserable because you run into the brick wall, and the Holy
Yeah.
Spirit says, it's vaporware. You can walk through it
Oh,
like
I love it.
easier than a
Vaporware.
cloud, much easier
That
than a sheet of feathers. It's just not even a cloud. It's, but from
exactly.
where we're at, we have to be appreciative of where we're at,
Absolutely.
and
That
not
it's
condemn
not our
ourselves
experience. Yeah.
when we appear that, the 5 light years thick of solid granite and steel and barbed wire. It's like, yeah,
Yes. Be kind to ourselves, which
yeah,
you and I, Bruce, bring it back all the time. All of our podcasts, often they come back to being kind with
yeah,
yourselves. And I
yeah,
use this a lot with clients too over the years to make a point. We don't need to judge people or have them be different than they are. We can be kind. We don't go to our third grade child and say, oh, you should be in sixth. Why aren't you in sixth? Well, no, they're in third because
right,
that's where they're supposed to be, and there's nothing wrong with that. And then they'll maybe go to fourth and then fifth and whatever. Sometimes people skip a grade, great, but everybody's where they're supposed to be. And it's almost
yeah,
like we're running around policing the universe. And, there's so much to be said for not being in the mode of making the world and projection so real that we have to run around, we have to correct everything, we have to think people need to be in a certain place or not. And when all that's taken away, because your right mind is going, well, what people? Yes, well, that's our experience here, and
mhm,
we enjoy our families and our relationships and our this and that's not about that,
right,
but it's about at the end of the day people always say they want the world to be better. They want to see change. They want to. That's within, guys.
mhm,
That's really it's an old saying, but you have to change the way you're looking at the world. A Course in Miracles isn't about changing the world at all. It's about changing your belief that there is a world out there. And along the way, we have a gentle classroom of forgiveness.
mhm, mhm,
Forgiveness is key, of recognizing what you think your brother has done to you has not occurred because it's part of your projection. This is not letting people off the hook. This is recognizing where the people and images are coming from, your own mind. And then aren't we able to enjoy our lives and things more without the
mhm,
projection of guilt and the correction and the judgment? And every time we're looking at wars on the TV screen, every time we're looking at if it's politicians that trigger people, if it's what's going on in the economy, if it's like you mentioned several things at the beginning, it can be anything. If we really have the courage to say, well, that is upsetting in the dream, that I
mhm,
am upset about that.
mhm,
But as lesson 5 says, I'm never upset for the reason I think. Darn it, why would that be? Because that isn't good behavior. And we acknowledge that that's not good behavior. But if we really want to heal and feel better, and we have to recognize where it's all coming from.
mhm,
And that's why this thought system is so helpful, because you can go to the cause and then you can extend out from that realization in your mind, extend love in the dream, whatever form it takes. We can't love everybody physically as people, but our love can take the form. Our minds make the form of
mhm,
helping someone in a grocery line, or um, helping someone across the street, helping your child at school, you and your spouse are having a good conversation, giving blood to a cause, recognizing that a lot of those people are still in fear with this war. You know what? This website might be an interesting thing, and you just give something out. It's not that you're not doing things, it's what's the energy behind it. And are you really asking yourself, am I really perceiving this correctly? Just a question. We might say, yep, I decided I am today, and go have dinner. Great. Today you decided that you are. You go have dinner and you're not doing it, and you don't judge yourself for it.
yeah,
And you say, gosh, my body in the dreams holding on to this grievance. Darn it, I'm holding on to it. And don't judge yourself. Just go on with the day. And eventually, everybody, whether it's this lifetime or a seeming other lifetime, eventually people get tired of the same old thing, or they want to know why things aren't working because the world doesn't provide any answers for that. In all my years, the decades that I've lived, they're still fighting over the health care for people and things like it doesn't matter what side you're on. This is just an example of things never really get done, right? And then if something gets done, there's something else that pops up as a replacement. And then you realize, oh, then that didn't really even get done. Okay, now I have this. Okay, that seems like it kind of got done. Oh, that's inching along. Oh, that's moving forward. Oh, it's just, if you
Never
really
getting to the root
think about
cause,
it,
huh? Yeah.
never getting to the root cause. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, yeah. Because we don't look at the contents of our mind. What you
Right.
said something a moment ago, we were talking about
Mhm.
sacrifice, and I was thinking about, the phrase "the ultimate sacrifice" is usually referred to as putting your body on the line, right? But
Right.
from the course's perspective, it would seem like the ultimate sacrifice is really the belief in duality, the belief in
Separation. Yeah.
separation, differences, and that whole thought system.
Yes.
And yet ultimately we have to sacrifice the idea of sacrifice. So it's like everything else, the course turns
Right.
around so many, literally everything. I mean,
Flips it
every
around. Yeah.
question every value that we hold at some point, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yes, it takes courage to do it. When people can't do it, again, there's no judgment about that. But for those that can,
Mhm.
there are systems in place that will be helpful. And then they help the entire sonship because we're one with it. So we're recalling the fragmented pieces of our mind,
Yep.
withdrawing, going back to where the cause of everything really is. That's always helpful to the whole sonship, right?
Yep. Yep. Reclaiming the kinship that we have with everyone, right? And everything.
Yay!
Yeah. Yeah.
That's right. That's right. Under difficult circumstances. Again, no one's denying that the
Yeah.
world
Yeah.
is doing what the world's doing, but
Yep.
we have to go back and say, but where is the world coming from? The thought of hatred, sin, guilt, fear, death. It's a pictorial representation of what's in the larger mind. So it's always important to remember that when we can, when we feel like we're in a good enough state to remember those things, right?
Exactly. And I think we get little moments of respite when we do that forgiveness practice, when even if it's just momentarily say, gosh, what if I didn't feel the need to condemn or to make a big deal out of whatever?
Right.
Those moments of
What would that
respite
look
and peace.
like?
Yeah.
Yeah. What would that be like if I
Yeah.
didn't judge that person, or if I looked at that person or situation and said, there is that spark of light there. Everybody has a spark of light. What if we focused on that more,
Yeah. We all have that
silently
sanity.
in the mind? Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right.
Yeah. Yeah. I was thinking, and then the phrase, the world will merely cease to seem to be. I love that phrase in the
Isn't
course.
that a wonderful phrase?
Yeah, because
Merely
it's like
cease
in those
to seem
moments where
to
we
be.
forgive, it's like we're actually that problem. The little things cease to seem to be problems. But I think at some
Right.
point, the course reminds us, and we don't really have a sense of what that's all about because we're still, pretty far down the ladder metaphorically. If most of our time is spent in believing in separation, and if we're honest with ourselves, there's a fair percentage of that of each day
Right.
that we're concerned with. Well, what's in it for Bruce, kind of thing, and
Right.
what's going to make Bruce's life happy, and just
Right.
noticing that, and we can all ask ourselves that question, and just not condemn ourselves when we say, oh yeah, that's right, I was kind of hung up in that, instead of, well, what if the welfare of our whole being um, became my emphasis. That would be like you were talking about the altruistic acts and so forth, which are a
Mhm.
reflection of that thinking.
It's a reflection. Yeah,
Yeah,
here,
yeah.
you guys, because I always say to people that you have the power, the highest power behind you when you want to choose to see the reflection of love here, when you want to choose that over a fear, a sinful or a guilty state. You know, it's very hard, and any therapist knows this, and you don't have to be a therapist that know this, but I say therapists hear about it all day long, that people feel so guilty, right? What if people just entertained the thought just for a moment, saying, you know what, I'm being told I can look at this another way. Yes, the behavior, I'm seeing what people are saying about the behavior, but who am I? What does that have to do with the Son of God, who's outside of time and space, and dreaming that I'm identified with this body? Just to entertain the thought, right? It's very difficult to do because it seems like you're denying something, or I'm not, admitting that I did something wrong. Well, guess what? When you're in your right mind, when you switch and you say, let me see a miracle instead of a grievance, it will be so much easier for you to apologize if that's called for in the dream, for you to own up to your behavior, because you have the power of love behind you. Oh my gosh, can I share one thing that Ken Wapnick said that's brilliant, that I'm going to paraphrase and not do exactly correctly, but he said, all right, New York City is really busy and people are on subways and you're packed in, and you're in the subway and someone steps on your toe and it really, really hard. Guess what? It's going to hurt a lot less when they apologize to you. See how we perceive it when they say, oh my gosh, I went on your foot. Oh, that's okay. Oh, I know it's so crowded. You're not in the pain. But when they step on you, you believe someone has attacked you on purpose, and you believe, and they go off the bus, oh, you're going to be in more pain, right? Things hurt a lot more when kindness goes a long way, right? So it's a good reflection again. It's a good symbol in the world of, oh my gosh, where am I putting my attention? Well, someone just joined with me and said, I'm so sorry for that. And you go, oh my God, mistakes happen. Oh, I know my foot, but I know it's so crowded, isn't it? Why is the B train so crowded? And you have a conversation. You're not focused on the pain, right?
Yep.
But if you
Different
want to
mindset.
be different mindset, if you want to be unfairly treated, and you've started with the teacher of guilt in your mind, and that person just runs off the subway train, you're going to hurt. Your toe's going to hurt. Your foot's going to hurt.
You know
More.
what? As you were sharing that, I was thinking of, isn't it a Greek or Roman myth of Janus, the two-faced god? Anyway, what triggered it was the biblical quotation of turning the other cheek. I was thinking, well, it's sort of like the other person really is a part of us. And when we remember that, even if it's not really that conscious, but we have a feeling that I'm not going to solve anything by furthering the upset. But if I can, metaphorically turn the other cheek by seeing myself in the other person, that really becomes a mirror of the beauty that's in the kindness in that moment that's possible. I was also kind of thinking about my favorite line in the psychotherapy pamphlet that to me applies to everyone, not necessarily just in a clinical setting, and that is that the healing, I'm going to paraphrase too, as usual, the healing happens when the therapist forgets to judge the patient. And I love it. And I think that that's so true, that when, and we're all therapists, when we're using Holy Spirit as our therapists, then we're going to make, sound decisions, and because we'll want to see the innocence behind the form, and that's but being willing to look at how we want to project the guilt is how we see, oh, wait a minute, do I really want to go there? And you just kind of catch yourself before the sword goes into the next stroke. And you're like, how did this get in my hand? It's like, oh, well,
wait a minute. Yeah, I must have put it there because
it's
my hand. Yeah. Well, your point is excellent. We're all therapists and we're all teachers, and we're teaching one of two things all the time. We're either teaching separation sin, guilt, and fear, or we're teaching the correction through the miracle and through true forgiveness. We're always teaching one of two things, even if we don't realize it, by how we're being with other people, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground. I think it's been about an hour or so.
Okay, it's always so fun
It is.
have these discussions.
Yeah. I'm gonna have to review this and learn some things that I probably will get by listening to it again.
And it is fun.
It's usually how that works. It's like,
it's how
oh
it
yeah, I
works.
could practice that some more.
Right. Oh
Yeah.
yeah. Did we say that? Oh, okay. Oh yeah. The course does say that.
That was some pretty
right?
good stuff she said. I might have to try that.
Yeah, well, that Jesus said. Yeah, I know. So that's what happens when you open the book and you start reading and you're doing things. You're like, wow, this is great. I don't remember reading that 2 years ago. What a great line. You're revisiting it again and again, seeing things
For
on
sure.
deeper levels. It's so fun. So it's so fun having these discussions. I'm so glad we
Likewise.
won't wait too long next time.
Sounds
So
good.
for the
Sounds
next
good.
one. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Jackie. Really appreciate the conversation and the insights and the sharing. So
Thank you too so much, Bruce, and we'll see you again soon. So
do
be
you have
well
any
and
announcements you want to
blessings.
make?
Oh, you know what? I don't know that I do right now. I'll probably get off the call and go, oh, I could have said that. Yeah, I don't think I have anything at the moment. I mean,
Okay.
maybe my online classes, if
Yeah.
people are just interested in kind of just going deeper with the course, we cover
Yeah.
certain sections. They can just hit JackieLoraJones.com and hit on classes. Sometimes people want constant reminders or whatever. And we have a really nice subscriber group, and that's just JackieLoraJones.com. And you can put, become a subscriber or click the online classes button. And other than that, I guess I just want to say to remember, everybody, you're loved and you are loved, and just be well and blessings.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks to you too, Bruce. And we'll see you soon.
Yes. Looking forward to it.
All right. Bye for now.